Hello all, welcome to the show. I'm Gus Gagliardi and this is Fire Code Tech. On Fire Code Tech, we interview fire protection professionals from all different careers and backgrounds in order to provide insight and a resource for those in the field. My goal is to help you become a more informed fire protection professional. Fire Code Tech has interviews with engineers and researchers, fire marshals, and insurance professionals, and highlights topics like codes and standards, engineering systems, professional development, and trending topics in the industry. So if you're someone who wants to know more about fire protection or the fascinating stories of those who are in the field, you're in the right place. Hello all, welcome to episode 23 of Fire Code Tech. In this episode we have Michael Kilby. Michael is the Associate Director for Fire Protection at the Smithsonian Institute. In this episode we talk about fire protection for museum occupancies and collection storage. This episode is really fascinating. Michael talks about his career and some of the really unique challenges that he deals with being in corporate fire protection for the Smithsonian Institute. There's some great information learning about that the Smithsonian Institute not only houses museum facilities but also numerous amounts of research occupancies and different laboratories. This interview is about museum and storage collections, but I think that this interview is applicable for anybody who wants to protect high-value assets. Michael gives some great insight to some misconceptions about fire suppression and how we can tackle this public education piece for building owners and for everybody involved in fire and life safety. Also, Michael talks to us about codes and standards. He sits on the committee for NFPA 909 and 914, both museum-related NFPA standards. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode and follow us on social media. Let's dive in. Hello, Michael. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thanks, Gus. Really pleased to be here.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to get started with telling the listeners a little bit about your background and how you got into working in fire and life safety. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that?
Okay, yeah, sure. Well, I think like a lot of people, my career field is happened somewhat by chance. I was going to school for mechanical engineering, and just through a family friend, I found out about University of Maryland's fire protection engineering program, and I said, "Wow, that sounds a lot more interesting to me." They had classes like pyrometrics of materials and fire dynamics, which just sounded fascinating. And so I went into the department, talked to the chair for about an hour, found out, the whole mission of fire protection is, it's all about saving lives and saving property, which really struck a chord with me. And so I switched over into fire protection engineering. Got my degree from University of Maryland, and pursued my career in fire protection.
Man, what a beautiful program to stumble into. The University of Maryland, arguably one of the foremost in the nation, if not the most, one of the most foremost fire protection engineering programs in the nation. So that's incredible that you got your start somewhat by happenstance. Yeah, it's not an uncommon story I've found in fire protection to find yourself in the field out of not maybe not pre-designed, but I found that it usually sticks to the ribs once people get into the field. So that's fascinating. I'm happy to hear about that.
Yeah, and I noticed that in when I was a student in fire protection, probably between a third and half the class had some firefighting background. So you had some that were just engineers that switched over into fire protection, and then you had another group of students that were already in fire protection field. They were either professional or volunteer firefighters that wanted to get a technical degree and do something in fire protection.
Yeah, I think you're right. I've spoken with a number of people who have, either family members or people in their life that were in the fire service, or some inkling that they would like to be in engineering, and then kind of found their way into it in that regard. But I wanted to speak a little bit more about you know your career and kind of how you found yourself at the Smithsonian, or maybe uh, speak a little bit about the transition from your education to your role at the Smithsonian.
Okay, yeah, sure. Well, let's see. I graduated from University of Maryland back in 1988, so it's been and I've been with the Smithsonian ever since. Just coming as a new engineering student coming out of school, I wasn't really sure where I was going to end up working, um, but it was a good time back then. For looking for a job, and I got multiple job offers with different government agencies, private sector, oil industry. Um, but when I had my interview with the Smithsonian, I think I knew that's where I wanted to go. It was just such an interesting place. Uh, for our listeners, if you've been to the Smithsonian as a school age kid, I think most kids are really enthralled with the exhibits. And I remembered that from when I was a school age kid. I was like, wow, this is a really cool place. I want to work here. And I really liked the mission of the Smithsonian, which was their mission is the increase and diffusion of knowledge. And I said, wow, that's something I could work for and try to protect, that mission. So right out of school, I ended up landing a job at the Smithsonian as a sort of entry level fire protection engineer. And fortunately, when I started, um, I was working with, they had like 4 other fire protection engineers working at the institution. So, I had definitely had experienced people to learn from.
That's nice that you had some mentorship and some people who you could, learn the craft from. Yeah, I could understand that the Smithsonian would be, I mean, pretty much it's yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's an extremely well-known institute in the U.S. I mean, and probably the world at large. Um, I mean, it's incredible. I had the opportunity to go as a young man to a couple of the Smithsonian museums, and I feel like it's a place of wonder for a lot of people who get to enter it and be a part of it. So yeah, I could understand why you would be drawn to such an organization and a pursuit like that.
Yeah, there's just so much going on. That so I've been there 30. I guess it's my 32nd year, and I've never gotten bored. There's always new challenges. I think what a lot of people don't, everyone knows the Smithsonian as for its museums, but I think a lot of people don't realize that it's actually a really large research organization. So we have 19 museums and research centers, and while most of them are in the Washington D.C. area, we have other museums and research centers scattered around the country and even outside the country. We have 2 museums up in New York City, an American Indian Museum, and the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum. And we have observatories in Boston, Arizona, and in Hawaii. And we have environmental research centers in Maryland and down in Panama, multiple sites in Panama. So there's a lot to keep you busy and a lot of variety.
Man, that's incredible. I did not know about all the research pursuits that the Smithsonian's involved with. That's pretty fascinating. Man, yeah, I had no clue about the diversity of the range of different facilities that you're involved with. That must be, I was just thinking, just with the complex hazards and valuable assets that you're protecting in the main locations with the museums. That's plenty of challenge and interesting fire protection systems in itself. But outside of the, I mean, in Panama and other places, that's pretty incredible. I'm sure that you have a wide variety of fire protection systems and codes and standards that you have to navigate in order to provide life safety solutions for these facilities.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because we are working in different jurisdictions, different states, even different countries sometimes, and so we have to work with other fire marshals, other governments. Um, but because the Smithsonian is a federal entity, generally, my office serves as basically the fire marshal for the Smithsonian or the code official for the Smithsonian. Um, but we still, have to work with the local jurisdictions to make sure, because we depend on their fire departments to save us if we do have a problem. So we want to make sure that we're cooperating with them.
Wow, that's an extremely interesting position that, to be the authority having jurisdiction for, an international, a program that has international reach and scope. And, um, probably it sounds like dozens of buildings that you're involved with from a fire protection and life safety standpoint. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think overall, I think we have about 600 buildings,
Wow.
and I think it's 16 million square feet of space.
Holy
Um,
moly.
so yeah, it's some of those buildings are a small shed somewhere, and then other ones are buildings like the Natural History Museum, which is 1.5 million square feet. So a real wide variety of spaces and types of occupancies.
So with the scope that's that wide and just a range of facilities, like what does it look like for you to provide fire protection and life safety for these facilities? What are you doing on a day to day basis, essentially, to review documentation or whatever it is, to provide compliant life safety for these buildings?
Yeah, that's a great question. From day to day, I'd say, and let me say also, it's not just me, of course. I got,
Right.
we have seven right now. We have seven fire protection engineers, plus myself, um, working at Smithsonian. So I'd say, as a group, we probably spend about 70% of our time on reviewing projects, reviewing designs and providing construction oversight to make sure, these projects are built according to our standards. Um, and then we probably spend about 20% of our time just doing facility inspections, going out and working with each individual, the management and others, staff at each of these facilities to make sure we understand what the processes are that are happening in that facility, and that all the fire prevention and fire protection um, requirements are being met. And then the last 10%, we're providing staff training, whether it's on things like hot work or how to protect your collections, those type of things, and developing policy for the Smithsonian.
That's very interesting. Yeah, it makes sense that you would spend a large portion of your time verifying that any of the number of, you know, uh, new construction or existing construction work is being done to the standard of the Smithsonian. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But, yeah, I wanted to touch on, for an entity that protects 600 facilities. I mean, how does the Smithsonian tackle like documentation or verifying that these very critical facilities stay up to date on, just the state and the compliance of their fire protection and life safety systems.
Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, it does take an organized approach to be able to do that. Fortunately, Smithsonian has a sort of an established process for all new construction, whether it's a small remodel or it's building a new wing on a building. And so we have a process in place where just starting from scope, scope of work all the way through to construction, uh, all stakeholders, and fire protection being one, but there's lots of other people who are interested in what's happening with these projects, whether it's accessibility or it's electrical or mechanical, all the other fields that need to be reviewed during design are involved. So there's a set process, and it's a sort of a stepwise process where you start from scope of work and you go to 35% design, 65% design, 100% design, and each step all the reviewers get to review the drawings and specifications, make comments, get those resolved, until we have a final sign off on the design, and one of the people have to sign off on those final drawings, and then it moves to construction. Um, and then we're involved in reviewing all the construction submittals and do all the acceptance testing for new systems, final inspections, and then finally it ends with us issuing a certificate of occupancy for that new space. All that information, every comment that everyone makes during the design, all the construction submittals are captured in a database, so that we have a record of it. Um,
Yeah,
is it perfect? I would say no, it's not perfect, but it's pretty thorough.
yeah. I mean, nobody's perfect, and no documentation process is perfect. But yeah, I just know that for any facility owner, that's a big challenge. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about that because I know that I deal with owners all the time, and it's one of the hardest things to do is have a set of construction documents or specifications from when the building was built or when different changes within the building has happened over the years of 50, 60, 70, 100 years buildings can be around for. So yeah, that's kind of the reason why I was probing in that direction.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right, Gus. And I mean, I guess the one advantage we have is that generally our properties aren't changing hands. They belong to the Smithsonian and they stay in the Smithsonian, so we basically have our hands on those records for the life of the building. Whereas in say a commercial property, it might over 100-year time it may change hands 5 to 10 times, and you never know if those documents are going to get forwarded to the next owner.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I guess it doesn't change hands, so that would help the standardization of the keeping the data in the right place.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So, in a similar vein of documentation and just kind of the management of facilities, I wanted to talk about how does the Smithsonian deal with like management of change. I when I think of the Smithsonian, like you said, I kind of think of the museums and exhibits, and like I just was wondering about when you do have a new exhibit or a new collection come into place, how are you or how does the Smithsonian like keep up with the ever changing you know fire protection and life safety complications of kind of rotating these different exhibits around?
That's a great question, and it is a challenge. Um, well, one, just having that review process does help us. So no matter how small project, it still goes through this review process, so we get a chance to see it. Um, even like when we change out an exhibit, it still goes through that review process. But there are other changes that are a little bit harder to catch. It could be, um, for example, we have a collection storage space somewhere, and they decide that they need to change all the shelving equipment. And sometimes there's just an awareness, like, oh, well, that might actually affect how you protect the collections. You might change the shelving, and now you need in-rack sprinklers, or you're blocking the sprinklers with the new shelving. Um, so that just takes trying to raise awareness with all the staff at the Smithsonian as to what kind of changes might impact fire protection or life safety, and then making sure that they contact our office to let us know when they are making those kind of changes. And then also, we have our facility inspections that we do, and we do those annually for all the buildings across the Smithsonian. So there are times where something gets missed, and then we're out doing a facility inspection, and then we catch it at that point. Uh, but certainly, our preference is to catch it ahead of time.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, I understand about the education piece of, helping people know when, you know, what things imply fire and life safety consequences. And so, yeah, I often joke about wanting to create a frequently asked questions for, called like how you know when you need to involve fire protection. Working for a firm that does architectural and engineering design. Um, it could be, somebody in interior finishes is, designing shelving like you were kind of talking about. And, it's if you have solid shelving over X height, you might need fire protection or, those sort of things. So I understand kind of the education piece that you were speaking of.
Maybe that could be your next endeavor.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah. But yeah, so wanted to talk a little bit more about, I found you through a great presentation you did about museum and, fire protection for museum and collections. And, I just wanted to speak a little bit about some of the great stuff you talked about in that presentation. Just a little bit of a high level overview of, you know, what are some good strategies for, fire protection for these high value occupancies where you have these assets that are historically and culturally extremely valuable? How does this differ from more standard occupancy? If that's not too nebulous of a question.
No, I think that's a great question. And that it certainly is one of our, I guess you could call specialties, is protecting collections. For our mission, our division's mission, I think certainly life safety is always the highest priority, and then right behind that is protecting collections, because if we don't have collections, there really isn't a Smithsonian. So. Um, and certainly we put a lot of focus on collection storage areas, protecting collection storage areas, because that's where we have the highest density of collections, and that's where we have the potential for greatest losses in our collection storage spaces. And I'd say we take sort of like to call a multi-prong approach to protecting collections. We use fire rated construction to isolate our collection spaces from adjacent spaces, using fire and smoke barriers. And then we almost 100% use automatic sprinklers for fire suppression. In some specialized collection spaces, we also have gaseous total flooding gaseous suppression systems like FM200 or Energen. Um, and then we always provide fire detection typically it's either spot type smoke detectors, or more recently we've begun using a lot of air sampling smoke detection in those collection spaces. And then on the other side of the coin is, we try to really have strict fire prevention protocols in place for all our collection storage spaces. And then that's where we have to work with our collection staff and provide training, and make sure they're aware of, don't bring extra combustibles into the collection storage spaces. Try to have them do all their conservation work and other types of work outside of the collection storage space, and really have those collection storage spaces dedicated just for storage. And of course, these are very secure spaces, so which works in favor of fire protection as well, because you have the less staff you have going into these spaces, the less likely something's going to happen, some type of accident's going to happen that's going to start a fire.
That's an interesting point about a housekeeping note about, you know, I think of, housekeeping in the regard of, keeping the aisles clear and, like combustible dust and things, but I haven't, thought about the note as much about housekeeping and not, loading up a space with extra extraneous combustibles. But I can see how that could become a concern fairly quickly with the amount of collection work and the just the value of the collection work that you're doing. That's an interesting note.
Yeah, there's a lot of just awareness training, I think, that we try to do with our collection management staff. We might go into a collection space and perhaps there was a single roof leak somewhere. So then, um, you know, very well meaning, they went and covered all the collection shelving with polyethylene sheeting, right, to protect it from a roof leak, any future roof leaks. And we're like, well, one, if you have a fire, that stuff's going to burn and it's going to melt onto your collections, and two, it's going to shield this the collections from getting wet, which will prevent the sprinklers from doing their job. So it's raising awareness about things like that, so that they make careful decisions that don't detract from fire protection.
Oh, that's interesting. So they're unintentionally like encapsulating the storage arrangements. Yeah, I could see how a well-meaning, something like that could cause fire protection complications. But yeah. So I wanted to get into a little bit more of, yeah, I love the seems like storage is a huge topic in the industry, just as an overall design hazard, and it's a really big problem. I think that a lot of people have a misunderstanding about it, and just how to adequately deal with storage, of the high powered variety, but also just of the miscellaneous sort. So, yeah, I just wanted to, talk to you about some of the, I know you spoke about the different strategies of multi prong fire protection for these collection spaces. But yeah, I just wanted to pick your brain a little bit more about storage and how the Smithsonian deals with storage. If you had any more food for thought on that subject.
Yeah. Another thing is just the choices made for storage equipment. Shelving, cabinetry, and those type of things can go a long way in either protecting the collections or making them more vulnerable. Um, Certainly, we encourage our collection staff, when they're making decisions about storage, to look at using closed cabinetry. Metal cabinets that are actually closed. So, we have some collection storage spaces where everything is in a closed metal cabinet, and it's very difficult to even imagine a fire spreading through a space like that where everything's in a closed metal cabinet. Um, so that's a great fire protection measure. Um, And then we have other areas where everything's on an open rack shelf. Say it's furniture collections on open rack shelves with like a metal mesh shelving. And then we find that the collections staff are putting in solid plywood on top of the metal mesh so that the feet of the chairs don't go through the mesh. You have something to hold the furniture up, and then that creates a whole issue, right, with distribution of the sprinkler water. So we try to work really closely with the staff so that we make good decisions right from the beginning about how to store the collections. And then I noticed, the past 10 to 15 years, there's been a real move to use compact shelving, the mobile shelving, because you can store more collections in a smaller space with this compact shelving. But that also, creates challenges for sprinkler protection. You have to make sure that the compact shelving has adequate space between the units so that the sprinkler water can get down between the shelving and prevent a fire from spreading from shelving unit to shelving unit.
Yeah, that's a definite challenge I've seen. Mobile rack storage, or not rack storage, but mobile storage, and then automated storage now, as I've seen in a couple of facilities. But it's hard to know what to do with those because, I mean, if you're dealing with something like a vertical carousel, that's stationary, but is a more compact, concealed sort of storage, you can put a sprinkler in it. But with these, mobile storage um, configurations, yeah, you can't really put a sprinkler pipe in a moving storage cabinet. So it's interesting hearing you talk about the spacing being the critical factor.
Yeah, and NFPA 13, the code for sprinkler protection, provides some guidance on mobile shelving. But it's interesting because then if you look at um, the code for protecting cultural resource properties, NFPA 909, they give different guidance on how to protect compact shelving. And the reason it's different is because the goal is different. With NFPA 13, the goal is prevent your building from burning down. With the NFPA 909, the goal is to minimize the damage to your collections. So you want to have more robust protection for your collections so that your goal isn't just keep your building from burning down, it's to contain a fire as quickly as possible. And for in this case with mobile shelving, it's to contain the fire to a single shelving unit so that you minimize your loss of collections.
Wow, that's a great note about the nuances between the different NFPA documents. Yeah, I really like that. It's really fascinating for me to hear about. You get to see a line of text in one of these NFPA codes, but some of the best information from the people who are involved with the codes and standards process is the getting to hear the logic behind why that we do some of the things that we do, and what the genesis of some of these provisions in the codes are. So yeah, I that's a great note on those differences in the standards, codes and standards.
Yeah, when you're working with the codes a lot, you realize sometimes you just need to talk to the people who actually develop the code.
For sure, without a doubt. So yeah, on the similar topic of suppression, for the project I was working with, I was dealing with the museum occupancy. When I was looking for the information that led me to your work, I was dealing with the museum occupancy, and I was struggling with the topic of, the owner had suggested that they had wanted they said the email that I received said dry pipe, but it was actually a pre-action system, and I was struggling with, kind of some of my knowledge about, the differences between wet and pre-action systems and which one I would prefer from a engineering and reliability standpoint. But yeah, I just wanted to speak with you a little bit about suppression and um, what you see as the pros and cons for pre-action system, um, contrasting to wet pipe sprinklers for high value assets. I mean, it doesn't just have to be in the context of the Smithsonian, but in just property protection in general.
Well, that's a great question, especially in the museum world. That's a big question and a sensitive question. There's a lot, across museums, at least in this country, and I think elsewhere, even the idea of sprinklers worries a lot of museum professionals. When you talk to museum professionals, a lot of them are more worried about water than they are fire. So, wet pipe versus pre-action is a big question. For the Smithsonian, I'd say probably 9 out of 10 of our sprinkler systems are wet pipe. I'd say certainly the majority of our building spaces are protected with wet pipe sprinklers, but we do have pre-action systems as well. And you're right. Each one has their pros and cons. Certainly, wet pipe is the simplest type of sprinkler system, right? And the most reliable. It's a beautiful thing. It's so simple. You just put pressurized water up into a sprinkler system, and you wait for a head to fuse, and the system is working. But we have used pre-action systems in some of our more sensitive areas. Some collection storage spaces, some like IT server rooms. We use pre-action systems, and actually, right now we're doing a survey of all of our art collection storage areas where we have like paintings on open racks, because that's a really vulnerable type of arrangement for collections, where they could be impacted by an accidental sprinkler discharge. So we're surveying all those spaces and we're going to take a look to see where we might want to switch from wet pipe to pre-action for those type of spaces.
That's interesting. Yeah, I would imagine that. I know that for the preservation of some of these paintings, they have to be coated with different chemicals and just different preservatives. So having them stored open and just in arrangement like that, I could see how that could be hazardous. That's interesting that you say that.
Yeah,
Um,
if you had one sprinkler leak or one sprinkler discharge over open racks, it could certainly affect a lot of paintings.
yeah, yeah. It was kind of like an eye-opening moment. I was listening to. I think somebody asked a question during your presentation. About bleeding pre-action systems, or kind of flushing pre-action systems in order to get the water clearer out of the sprinkler systems. And then as a fire protection professional, I'm just kind of cringing inside. But I know that the layperson wouldn't know about you know why you wouldn't want to do that. But yeah, I just how do you feel about like nitrogen and the use of that in, like, when you do have to use pre-action systems.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think that's something that's really a lot of people are thinking about now. We've certainly had some locations where we've had issues with pipe corrosion on both wet pipe and pre-action systems, and we've begun looking at using nitrogen systems to try to slow down that corrosion process in our systems. Um, yeah, actually, in fact, right now we're in the midst of installing a nitrogen system at the National Postal Museum in Washington D.C. So I certainly think the nitrogen systems have merit, and can help provide longevity to your systems and make them more reliable. So I guess it's really on a case by case basis. If you have systems where you have corrosion issues, then certainly the expense of putting a nitrogen system, may be worth it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. As a somebody who designs systems or tries to give guidance to facilities owner, I'm constantly straddling the line of making a cost effective, code compliant solution, while struggling with the needs of the owner as far as asset protection and where they have additional concerns. So I think that's a great sentiment about if you have known corrosion issues with your water supply, then it might be worth the investment to extend the lifespan of your system.
Yeah, and we're cost conscious too, and we're always battling the other forces of we have people who are looking out for keeping costs down, where our goals are more in line with protecting the Smithsonian, protecting the collections, and also getting as much longevity out of our systems as possible. So it's weighing all of those forces and seeing which one wins out, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I hear you there. Um, so I wanted to talk about a little bit of your work in the codes and standards process. I'm always fascinated about hearing from individuals who are involved in the process because I'm a code nerd myself. So I I'm just interested in hearing about the different um, codes and standards that people are in the process of helping promulgate and just be involved with. But yeah, I just wanted to hear you speak a little bit about your work on 909 and 914, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, sure. Okay. So, well, just for everyone, these two codes probably aren't the most well-known codes out there. Um, but NFPA 909 is the code for protection of cultural resource properties, museums, libraries, and places of worship. And then NFPA 914 is the code for protection of historic structures. I've been on the NFPA Cultural Resources Committee um, over 20 years, I believe. I think it was in the 90s when I joined. And so this committee develops these two codes. And for those that don't know a whole lot about NFPA, all their code committee codes are developed by consensus. So each committee, they try to have a balance of people on each committee from different sectors of fire protection. On the committee, I represent a user, right? We use the code to ensure our buildings are safe, but we also have others who are either like a fire marshal, or we have people from the insurance industry. We have other committee members from other museums. Um, I'm trying to think what other groups we have on the committee.
Special experts,
Yeah,
did you say those?
absolutely.
Or
You're right. Special experts, people like you who are coming from the architectural engineering side or consulting side.
installers, maintainers, right?
Installers, maintainers. Thank you, Gus. having a brain cramp there. So
That's okay. It's hard when I'm having you do all the heavy lifting for the whole interview. I'm just leaning on you for these complex answers.
no,
Michael, give us the dictionary for all these codes and standards. But no,
I
I
appreciate your
appreciate your
help.
exposition.
I mean, I've been, I feel like I've been so lucky to be on this committee just because there's such a wide variety of experience and depth of expertise on the committee. So I've learned so much from being on this committee. Um, and so this committee develops these two standards and updates them every few years. Um, but really, like if for people in the museum world, these codes are such a great resource because it's just not a set of standards. There's just a lot of information in these codes. Like NFPA 99 has multiple appendices on they have statistics on fires in museums. It has a whole appendices on the fire ratings of archaic materials. There's just a lot of very useful information for museum professionals and for fire protection professionals who are working in a museum world.
Yeah, I think that these might be not as in the cultural zeitgeist as some of the other standards for NFPA, like a 13 or a 101 or a 72. But when I was working on my project with the museum occupancy, I was taking a look at, I think it was um, 909, and it had a wonderful table on like the pros and cons of different fire protection systems, and as far as some of those factors that Michael and I were talking about with reliability, and so it was a really great resource that I didn't even know existed. And so even though these might not be reference standards in the building code, I think they're a fabulous resource for individuals, and also just a great. I mean, there's a lot of great history in these code books about the codes and standards process and just fire protection in general. So yeah, I'd say definitely something worth the time to go and take a look at these codes, and they have some great insight for fire protection and life safety.
Well, I think that was. I'm really glad you found that code when you were working on your museum project, and I think there's a lot of people out there, a lot even fire protection professionals that may not even realize that code exists and is a good resource. Um, so, um, we certainly want to raise awareness that these codes are out there and that they are a really good resource, and they're really written, not just for the protection professional. They're also written so that someone in just the museum world that with no fire protection background can use them.
Yeah, that's a great note. It's easy for me to get tunnel vision on, providing, fire protection systems, but it's an important note that these codes and standards are available to the public, and are available to people who are more on the layman side of things, or maybe just less involved with this process than we are. So that's a great point.
Yeah, and now they're actually free, right? Because NFPA's put their codes online and provides free access.
Yeah, you can go and take a look at them at any time. I've definitely had to Google NFPA documents while I was on site before to try and find something out on my phone. But yeah, it's good to know that you can access those whenever. I didn't know that for a long time.
Yeah, and it didn't used to be that way. If you go back 10 years, 15 years, if you wanted a code, you had to buy each code individually or buy the entire set.
Yeah, man, that's a pain. It's hard when they it's hard when they keep changing too,
Yeah.
even though they didn't used to be as robust as they are now. But yeah, so I just wanted to kind of end the interview with some professional development topics. But yeah, I just wanted to ask what you saw as a meaningful trend in fire and life safety right now. I'm sure with somebody who has their finger on the pulse in regards to fire and life safety, like yourself, has some ideas of what that could be.
Okay, that's a good question. Sort of a overarching trend that I've seen for the past at least 15 years, I guess, is moving from a purely prescriptive approach to fire protection. Just employing the codes and that's it. To looking at things from a more performance based approach. Especially with the advancement in fire modeling, computer fire modeling, um, and actually being able to use different models together to be able to predict what's going to happen in a space if there's a fire, and what kind of measures you can take to safeguard the people in the building. So I would say that's certainly a trend that's going to happen. I mean, I don't think we're ever going to go to just pure performance based approach, at least not in my lifetime. But they're definitely, and we do use a performance based approach from time to time. Not, certainly not for every situation, but I think that's if I was a young engineer, I certainly would make sure I um, was up on computer modeling and performance based engineering.
Definitely, yeah. It seems like as the complexity of buildings keeps increasing, and we get more into the digital age, people are more and more comfortable with computer modeling or of some sort to back up these alternative approaches, if you will. But
And
yeah,
it's a more flexible. We use the performance based approaches when we need additional flexibility. We have some, for example, we have some buildings that some of our museums are in buildings that are over 100 years old, 150 years old, and you take a building like that and you try to apply the life safety code. Some of these buildings were built before the life safety code was even around, and they're historic, so we can't just blow holes in the side of the building and put additional exits.
yeah,
So we need to take a more performance based approach and find other solutions that don't fit neatly with the prescriptive code.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's a great point. The flexibility and approach, and when you have more challenging existing construction, and I mean that's not to mention like site considerations with historic buildings. I'm sure you're dealing with some extreme site constraints as well as just dealing with historic structures and that sort of thing. So that's a great point. I wanted to end with, what kind of resources would you tell people to go seek if they wanted to learn more about um, fire protection for museums or collections, or you could just keep it more broad and general if you would like to. But yeah, I just wanted to pick your brain on where you go to find good information on those topics.
Well, probably the broadest, and if you're not if you're a fire protection person, but maybe not a fire protection engineer, I would start with the NFPA Fire Protection Handbook.
Hmm.
The handbook's written for people with in all different types of fields. that have some interest in fire protection, and it has an incredible amount of information in the handbook. So I think that's a great resource. And then for those in the engineering side, I'd say the SFPE, the Society for Fire Protection Engineers. They have a lot of good resources, and you can go on their website. Certainly, their handbook is, I think it's a 2-volume handbook now. Has an incredible amount of information, and we certainly use that handbook. Certainly, and we talked about NFPA 909, 914. That's a great resource for museum fire protection. And then, for those who are on sort of the engineering tech side, I think, NICET has a wealth of information and training. And NICET is the, let me see if I get this right, National Institute for Certification in Engineering Technologies. And, so if you're more on the tech side of fire protection, I think NICET is a great resource.
Yeah, those are all great references. Yeah, I think that you can't get much more of premier fire protections, educational and just informational resources than SFP and NFPA. And yeah, as far as installation goes, it definitely seems like NICET is ubiquitous with qualifications and just industry standard um, competency.
Yeah, we have. Oh, I was going to say, just at the Smithsonian, we have a whole separate division that just maintains all of our fire systems across the institution. And I know they get NICET certified, whether it's in fire alarm systems or sprinkler systems or special suppression systems. So we certainly rely on NICET.
Cool. That's very interesting. Well, Michael, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on the show. You absolutely made my day for talking to me about the Smithsonian and the different the different topics about your career. I just want to say thanks.
Well, Gus, thanks you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and I'm just thrilled that you invited me.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Be sure to share the episode with a friend if you enjoyed it. Don't forget that fire protection and life safety is serious business. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are by no means a professional consultation or a codes and standards interpretation. Be sure to contact a licensed professional if you are getting involved with fire protection and or life safety. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.